Dan Rubenstein, we called it Second Act Saturday for a reason.
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
We called it Second Act Saturday for a reason. It did not disappoint. If nothing more, we got a bunch of very interesting second halves.
Oh, very
that
true.
I think we'll discuss on our Week 8 Campfire episode. Welcome one, welcome all. Gather around the campfire. We're going to get the fire started here momentarily. Of course, go through the headlining matchups, the so-called fire starters, as you know by now on the show. We've also got a new game we're going to call the Flame Game, which we'll play. Got time for your roasts and, of course, the scary stories that must be told around the campfire. Dan, how was your Week 8? How are you?
This was maybe my favorite weekend. I mean, I didn't get to watch the Oregon Ducks lose like they did last week. So this was maybe my favorite Saturday of the season thus far. Is that crazy to say?
You were pretty into this week. We were talking about this before we hit go live.
It's been pretty wall-to-wall fun. And
Yeah.
I say that knowing that what Ohio State and Penn State put out onto the field wasn't exactly categorized as fun. But
No.
I'd say that the season and teams and hierarchy and things falling into place in some unexpected, some expected ways is pretty fun to me. I like it. It felt complete. It felt well-rounded. It felt balanced.
October every year has this way of kind of reshuffling the deck.
Yeah.
And giving us further clarity because, of course, teams get into their conference schedules. For many of the top teams, the meat of their conference schedules. And it's just really hard, even at the end of September, to figure out who's good and who isn't. Which numbers can you fully trust? You need at least like 5-6 weeks worth of data to actually start trusting the numbers that we see on the spreadsheet. And so it takes weeks like this to help us figure out, all right, where do some of these teams rank in the pecking order? And if nothing more, I mean, it was a week that was probably a little bit short in terms of mass chaos, but certainly not in terms of giving us definition around some of the teams that I think we had questions about. And that's what we're going to get into as we do this Week 8 Campfire. Dan, shall we start up the fire?
Start that fire up, Ty.
All right. Love that sound. The big headlining matchup of the weekend was the Ohio State Penn State game.
Plant your flag, Ty.
Yeah.
I want this headline from you because you went through a roller coaster of emotions. What did this game make you feel?
We did a live stream, a 3.5-hour live stream. That's when my voice is a little raspy this evening as we record this. 20-12 was the final score in favor of the Ohio State Buckeyes. I did get a big time kick out of James Franklin's quote after this game because you and I were on the live stream. We were deliberating. What is Franklin going to say?
Yeah.
How is he going to frame this? And he framed this in such an audacious way. My jaw hit the floor when I read this quote. Quote, I'm not sure if we didn't just watch two of the best teams in college football. Obviously, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. That's a quote from James Franklin. Let me put on my Penn State alumni hat for a second.
Please do.
And speak from that perspective. Maybe you can zoom out and give us the big picture, objective view, the things that you're good at.
Oh, come on. We're sitting in front of a roaring emotional fire, Ty. The floor is yours.
It really is roaring and emotional. Thank you. So we talked about this in the preview. There had been signs of a showing like this from the Penn State offense coming. And some of us, yours truly, many other college football analysts and experts and content people, chose to ignore it. Chose to ignore it. The truth is that the explosion plays had not been there all season. Neither the running game nor the passing game. They just weren't there. It was, I think, very far-fetched to believe that they'd suddenly morph into a different offense in the most hostile road spot they will play in all season, the biggest game perhaps they would play in all year. Freshman quarterback who had never, well, not freshman, first-year starting quarterback, I should say, who had never been in a situation like this before, that suddenly they would just kind of amp it up to 1,000, become something new. That was far-fetched to me. As was I think, equally as far-fetched, if not more far-fetched, notion that perhaps Penn State was holding something back. I didn't buy that for a second. But my thought process coming into this was that the defense was good enough to hold down Ohio State, that Ohio State was not as good as they've been in years past. And I still believe that. And they did largely hold down Ohio State to give up only 20 points to an Ohio State offense that has as many weapons as it does. I think that's pretty good. That puts your offense in a chance to win. So I don't think I was wrong about that assessment. I do think the defense was good enough to put the offense in a position to win, to hold down Ohio State, to give James Franklin this chance to, get off the schneid and beat Ohio State for the first time in like 8 years, whatever it was. That analysis was not wrong. The problem for Penn State was that they not only did not get the long explosion plays, they didn't get the medium plays, they didn't get the short plays.
Right. What did you see out there?
This was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. This was a very, very poorly coached game on the Penn State side of things. And you could argue that it's been a poorly coached season with the way that they have played offense as of late. They were 1 of 16 on third downs, Dan. The offensive line seemed out of sorts to me. The receiver's ability to get open is non-existent. I know Drew Aller shares some of the blame for what we saw, but these receivers are not getting open. They're not getting separation from defenders. And the play calling, as I said before, the play calling is an absolute joke. I made the joke on Twitter about how conservative the play calling has been for Penn State, especially in these big situations. It was really bad. Really, really bad by Mike Yurcich and by James Franklin, by extension, James Franklin.
Yep.
So I just think like the most frustrating part for me is that James Franklin keeps trying to tell us that he's not a big game coach. And some of us, again, yours truly, are just too drunk on the hopium and the hype around Drew Aller and whatever else to believe it. And he's now lost like 7, 8 straight games to Ohio State. He has told us time and again who he is as a coach. And
wow.
And unfortunately, this is look, our friend David Jones, who we've had on the show many times over for PennLive.com, he put it best in his recap column. He said, James Franklin is losing both the battle and the war. And they're doing a great job on the recruiting trail. But the fact of the matter is, if you can't win the big games, only had a 2-game schedule this year. It was Ohio State and Michigan. Now, maybe not out of it yet. Who knows what happens? Michigan could probably beat Ohio State. Michigan does have to come to Happy Valley. Maybe they get themselves in order. But the team that we saw in Columbus today is not beating Michigan. And they're certainly not Big Ten championship caliber. They're certainly not a playoff team. They're just not. They do not have enough firepower on offense. And it drives me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just where they're at.
Man. Okay. So can I give the flowers? Is that what the Utes say? Can I give some flowers to the team that won this game?
Well, absolutely give some credit to Ohio State. You should have expected that I was going to rant on Penn State.
No, I did. And I think you committed to being Ty Hildenbrand, which is
just frustrating. It's really frustrating to kind of go into these seasons with all this hype. And, I said to you when we were doing the stream, like, great. All the hype in the preseason about getting this 5-star all-world quarterback, Mr. Football Ohio, right? What's the matter? You could have put Sean Clifford out there and had the exact same result today. Anyway,
talk about Ohio State. Completed a bunch of passes downfield last year.
Sean Clifford had receivers. It's a different situation.
Totally
different. I saw some other people make that comparison. It's a bad comparison. You got to watch the games to know what's going on. And I'm telling you right now, this is a totally different receiving core. That is first and foremost, in my mind, the reason for all this.
I love this. Okay.
Talk about Ohio State.
I think what Penn State accomplished or didn't accomplish on the field today kind of bailed out a not great performance from Ohio State in terms of what they had available to them, which was a Penn State offense that kind of hung its own defense out to dry, and its own defense somehow kept coming back and looked crazy good. The Penn State defense is awesome. It's incredible. It played super well against Ohio State, all things considered, considering the offense. I think that 1 third down conversion happened well after the game seemed like it was within reach, even though the score kind of indicated that Penn State was sort of kind of hanging around. It was never, when it was 20-6 or whatever, it was not a game. A lot of questionable Ohio State calls. You were making a big deal on the stream about how Ohio State kept trying to get the corner, kept trying to get the edge, and nobody gets the edge against this Penn State defense. Like, the Penn State defense is happy for you to try to play horizontally, and Ohio State kept trying to play horizontally. Now, the big advantage Ohio State has is Marvin Harrison Jr. plays for their team. Cade Stover plays, is wearing the scarlet and gray. And what Penn State seems to be is a failure of roster and team construction right now, because I don't think they have bad players. It just seems like the receiver room is on one side of campus. The quarterback room is on the other side of campus. The coach's room is on, in the quad somewhere. The offensive line room might be off campus in an apartment complex somewhere. And there's no real organization or cohesion to what this offense is going for. So you can look at this Penn State offense and say, yeah, the receivers aren't getting open. Like, I'm pretty sure the receivers that Penn State has recruited or has brought in from the portal, maybe they're not KJ Hamler, maybe they're not Jahad Dotson, maybe they're not any Allen Robinson, any of these guys, but nobody is until they get developed, until they become something, or until they're utilized properly within a system. Like, teams put up yardage on Ohio State. Teams put up yardage on Georgia, on Texas, on all sorts of crazy talented defenses because they're coached in smart ways to take advantage of who their players are, not what they're not. And so whether or not Drew Aller is going to live up to his hype as a 5-star quarterback kind of seems beside the point, because the players weren't put in a position to succeed. And maybe they're not all Big Ten caliber receivers or tight end. Maybe there's no Pat Freiermuth or, Hans Gesicki or something for Penn State. You got to make the best of what you got. I'm pretty sure there's a popular Dave Matthews Band song built around that very premise. So Ohio State played an okay game. They played against a great Penn State defense. They were slightly better coached with the most luxurious, finely woven security blanket in Marvin Harrison
You
Jr.
mean the Maserati?
The Maserati in
Man,
the. And so
he drove that Maserati name into the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, just kept using it, Gus Johnson.
Yeah,
I don't hate it, but it was a little much by the end.
I think Kyle McCord is okay. I don't think he is going to be what he will eventually be, hopefully, considering the young receivers Ohio State has. I don't think the organization of this Ohio State offense is anywhere near where it needs to be or has been, with Kevin Wilson, with Ryan Day, now that Brian Hartline is running things. They don't really run the ball that well. I really like Mayan Williams and his second efforts. Crazy impressive.
Second efforts were key for Ohio State. They were a big part of the reason why they won.
I kind of thought Ohio State's offense, against this defense was okay. Nothing crazy, nothing easy. But Penn State's just seemed like a root canal. And that's the difference in a game like this, that if you are going to recruit and invest like Penn State does in building a team that they feel like can be playoff caliber, and then show up and get that touchdown called back, that scoop and score called back as the biggest blow to your offense that could possibly happen, or your ability to score points, that means you're not ready. That means you have a ceiling of a Rose Bowl-ish team, but you're not ready to compete with the top of the conference. And there's no indication that that's going to change anytime soon. James Franklin's like 3-147 against top 10 teams.
No,
he's not a playoff coach. He's just not.
20-12, your final score.
Yeah.
Big win for Ohio State. I mean, we talked about this time and again. We're going to move on to the next game now. I'm going to try and we're going to throw this one in the fire and move past it. But a lot of football yet to be played in the Big Ten. And though Michigan, I think to a certain extent, looks untouchable despite all the distractions that we saw this past week, once you get into November in the Big Ten, weird things happen. They always do. And
can I give you
very curious to see how this thing shakes out in the end.
Can I give you a dose of perspective? You could be rooting for a top 10 team that's down 7-3 as we record this at the half to Arizona State, and something called Trenton Bourget throwing for 3.7 yards per attempt as the number 5 team in the country, Washington Huskies. They'll likely win this game by the time our show is over, but it could be worse because ASU has owned Washington this century.
Little bit of a hangover. Let's go to the 3:30 Alabama-Tennessee game. So Tennessee had a 20-7 halftime lead.
Yeah.
And got shut out 27-0 in the second half. Lost going away. This was a second half zombie Alabama. That's what this was.
Agreed.
So I think the lasting impression for me in this game, two of them. First off, the Bama defense in the second half was incredibly clutch. They were just so good. And they have performed, I think, pretty admirably for the most part this season. Maybe they don't have some of the star power that we are accustomed to them having in the front seven. Still really good. Still really good, Dan. They still get the job done when they have to, and they've done so for the better part of the season. Secondly, though, big time shout out to Jalen Milroe. What dawned on me as I was watching Jalen Milroe, especially in the second half, is how it is clear he's growing into that role. I don't know if it is a combination of factors. I don't know if it's one thing more than another, but Jalen Milroe seems like he is getting confidence. Tommy Rees, the way they call plays around Jalen Milroe, the way they run routes to suit his style of throwing the football, seems like it is improving. It feels like this team is getting better, and that's scary. That's scary because the SEC West is gettable. That's scary because the SEC as a whole feels like it's a little bit more topsy-turvy than it's been, especially now with the news last week of Brock Bowers being out for pretty much the remainder of the regular season.
Yeah.
So this to me strikes me as a Bama team that's getting better. With Jalen Milroe growing into the role, with them trusting him to throw it downfield in the manner that he is not perfect by any stretch, but he throws a good deep ball. It feels like they have finally figured that part out, and they're starting to incorporate it more into the offense as he builds a rapport with the receivers. Also, I think it was Gary Danielson on the broadcast. I think it was Danielson. It wasn't Nessler who mentioned it. Like, I feel like I've been saying this for a month now as well. They did start to incorporate some of the quarterback runs into the play calling as well. Some of the more designed run stuff. You read the YouTube comments before the season when we talked about Jalen Milroe. He's got NFL caliber speed. That's what every Alabama fan told us.
Sure.
We have not really seen that. At least we've seen bits and pieces of it when he has scrambled, but Alabama, for whatever reason, has not designed a whole lot of running plays specifically for him. We saw a little bit more of that.
You know why?
Well, I know why.
If he rolls an ankle or if he gets hit hard on his knee.
You don't want Tyler Buckner or Ty Simpson. I get it.
Right. You got it.
I get it. I get it.
The season a little bit. Yeah.
I get it. But, the season gets old pretty quick.
Yeah.
And it does feel like the SEC is there for the taking again. It really does. And so I think Jalen Milroe, the strides that he is making, is a really positive sign for Alabama. I have some thoughts on Joe Milton, but where do you stand on this game?
A fascinating watch. Tennessee looked balanced. They looked prepared. They looked energetic in this first half. They came out confident. Joe Milton was throwing dimes. They were running well. He was running well. The defense was getting off of the field. They were showing all of the signs of a team ready to start a streak against Alabama after last year's big shootout win in Knoxville. And I think it's just Alabama making adjustments. It's Josh Heupel. He took chances in that second half on fourth down, short yardage, big moments, not getting them. And I don't mind aggression, but you have to have Excelsior. You have to have that package of plays that you feel is fail-proof, that your team practices those plays, that package so often they couldn't possibly fail, no matter what defense is thrown at them. And that's not what Tennessee looked to be like in the second half. Now, you have that strip sack that gets returned for a touchdown. That's sort of a freak play, but that's an offensive lineman who's beat, right? You have Jalen Milroe hitting Isaiah Bond and Jermaine Burton, having that, for lack of a better term, the bond with them. There was sort of a coverage bust on the Bond longer touchdown. And I think the big thing is Alabama has faded in second halves recently. When you look at the Arkansas game, when you look at the A&M game, and they've managed to survive, this time they thrived in the second half. And it was, I think Joe Milton is an interesting quarterback. I think he is an intriguing quarterback. I think he's a fascinating quarterback. I think he's an exciting quarterback. But there are like 7 other adjectives that are less kind to say about him at times. And the rushing attack wasn't there. That has been there in recent weeks. Alabama really clamped down on that. And obviously they ran the hell out of the ball in the second half to keep the Tennessee defense on the field. And they were zombie Alabama. The big takeaway for me from this game, we didn't think Tennessee was going to win 11, 12 games this year in all likelihood. But now I look forward to post-bye, we get an adjusting, interesting, still kind of catastrophic offensive line Bama team taking on LSU, also a flawed team. And there's just so much play-to-play chaos potential there with the LSU defense and Jalen Milroe.
Oh, my God, yeah.
I skipped ahead while watching the second half of this game when it was clear that Alabama was going to put a punctuation point, a period, an exclamation point, whatever on this game. But that's where my mind went about how fun we'll have it in a couple weeks.
And look, Joe Milton, for his part, looked better than he did last week. That's not saying much, but he looked a lot better this week. But ultimately, it's like all of these games are decided by key moments, and the key moments seemingly all went in favor of Alabama. There were a couple fourth downs that went Alabama's way. Tennessee 0 for 3 on third downs. Tennessee was not great on fourth downs and third. I don't know. I'm getting my downs mixed up. It's late at night, but you get what I'm saying. The other thing is weren't great in the red zone either. So just some of these key moments, especially when you're on the road in a big rivalry spot, like the third Saturday in October, you're going to have to convert on those, and they just couldn't get it done. So again, your final score here, 34-20, a big second half from Alabama. Again, a 27-point showing in the second half, 27-0. They win going away. The final game I want to talk about here at the very top is the Utah-USC game.
Oh man, this is an unbelievable game.
We had a bunch of really good games into the early evening, and then of course the latter half of the day as we were about ready to hit record here. But the Utah-USC game is super interesting for a variety of different reasons. Utah has had the formula for beating USC. It just feels like they've had that formula. And the question coming into this one was, of course, they don't really play offense. They don't really play offense.
Yeah, they showed a spark last week, but it was against Cal, so you didn't know what to believe.
We didn't know what to believe. And what we debated on the preview show was, does that matter? Does that matter? And you settled on the fact that, well, they'll find it. They'll figure a way to do it because this is a USC defense that doesn't really stop anybody. And I said, well, I just think USC is too good. I think USC has too much firepower, too many ways to win. As expected, I was wrong. I've been wrong all year.
I tell you to trust me with the West Coast tie. I really do.
You lied to me before we picked this game. You said, I think I'm going USC. And I'm like, Dan knows what he's talking about. I built a whole thesis around USC.
But I took Utah on the show. You had the opportunity.
No.
Pivot with me.
This is like 48 hours after you told me which direction you were going.
I know.
You said you sat in a meditation chamber. You threw me a curve. You did it on purpose.
I did.
I still love you. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. But Utah wins 34-32, a 38-yard field goal at the gun, a big clutch run by Bryson Barnes at the very end of this game to get well within field goal range and set up that game-winning kick. It's telling that Utah I would call Bryson Barnes, who had a pretty good game.
He had a full-on good game.
Full-on good game. I would still call him a part-time backup because I don't know if they're fully committed to him. They like a little bit of Nate Johnson. Sometimes they like Bryson Barnes. Sometimes they don't. Maybe they'll like him more after this showing. But the point stands that basically a part-time backup helped Utah, which has not played offense all year, outgain USC.
Yeah.
And all of the hype surrounding this offense and Caleb Williams and all the firepower and Lincoln Riley and, oh my God, the offense. And again, it happens against Utah, Dan, once again.
Bryson Barnes is a quintessential. 14 months ago, he was running a PetSmart. And now, like, he's the quintessential because Cam Rising has been there for so long, being so good for so long. And Bryson Barnes has struggled this year, right? They've platooned him. Platooned? What am I
Platooned?
Platooned. I'm all over the place. There's my baseball reference. Plateaued him. With Nate Johnson, who certainly seemed to be more of a running option.
Yeah.
And then they sort of turned to, as we all predicted, a strong safety to help overhaul their offense away from looking like, Mountain Time Zone Iowa. And it worked against Cal. They jump out to, it's a 14-all game after like no time. USC's making hay and executing huge plays. Utah's marching downfield, running the ball downfield, so it's Sione Vaki, the sort of all-purpose weapon, plays safety, lines up in the backfield, was great catching the ball out of the backfield.
You love this guy. You're going to get a fat head down there of Sione Vaki.
Yeah. Do they still make those? Is that a thing still?
I don't know.
Not a sponsor. Hopefully still exists.
Yeah.
But he was terrific for them. The offensive line was very good. And USC just seems to find themselves playing in these games where Caleb Williams, he had an incredible touchdown throw where it looked like he overthrew the receiver by 13 yards, but he put enough loft on it that I forget if it was I think it was Taj Washington. Correct me if I'm wrong here. But had an incredible touchdown throw, made incredible plays with his arm and his legs, threw a bad pick. And it was just sort of USC fading. I think they They punted 4 out of the 5 drives after it was 14-all, and they score those 2 touchdowns. They're committing a bunch of penalties up front. You get the brutal, what looked to be a good roughing the passer call against Bear Alexander turned out to be a targeting call, which extended a late drive and helped to set Utah up for the game-winning field goal. And you're absolutely right. Like, Utah has had USC's number sort of, but it was with these like big tight ends who USC couldn't stop. Now it's just like a smallish safety who they're lining up creatively, who can plant his foot in the ground and go for 27 at any given moment.
Yeah.
And so Utah's a super well-coached team. They had all their timeouts at the end of the game. USC seemed to set themselves up in a good place by a long punt return from Zachariah Branch. Like, they have these playmakers, but they just can't string together positivity in a way that a more balanced team can. The defense can't get off the field. The defense can't get after the quarterback at all anymore. They got to the quarterbacks. They played in September. Quarterback Sam Hartman was very clean against USC, as you remember. And Bryson Barnes, for the most part, was kept pretty clean in a lot of big moments and ran, it was 3rd or 4th down and long. He had that long run down the sideline, almost untouched for the majority of it. Like, it's just a USC team that is a very fun, entertaining half team, and a Utah team that is better coached and better built to close out games because they can play defense and play some gutty offense when needed. So a great, entertaining game, but I think pretty instructive about where USC is and is probably heading.
Yeah, and the Utah story continues to get more interesting. Kyle Whittingham, we're told just tonight, announced that Cam Rising out for the season, Dan.
Oh, that's official. Okay.
So
I figured at this point, why would he come back now? Yeah.
Right. It figures to be Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson the rest of the way. There is a little bit of the way that Kyle Whittingham has structured this team, that they're kind of living in a post-quarterback world.
Yeah.
They play solid defense. They're a physical team. They're continually underrated, and yet they
USC ran on them pretty well, though. To be honest, USC, like, Utah's been playing some pretty disappointing offenses. They played Oregon State and lost to Oregon State, but USC did a really nice job game planning for this Utah team. It faded and Utah made nice adjustments, but USC came out really nicely against this Ute team. But alas,
here we go. As Jason Benetti pointed out on the broadcast, no 2-loss team has ever made the playoff. This was USC's first conference loss. I don't think we had any aspirations that this was a playoff team after what we saw against Notre Dame, and even in some of the games building up to this one. But it's official now. Not going to the playoff. I've got some thoughts on Caleb Williams that we'll get to in the roast segment.
Fair enough.
That's cool with you.
Yeah.
We've been talking about a lot of negativity. Shall we talk about some of the things that made us?
I try to be balanced here, Ty. I try to bring some sunshine. I know.
All my teams lose, all my picks lose. What do I like? Why am I even here? What am I doing?
You're just eye candy at this point.
Let's do it.
Oh my, he's on fire.
Ooh.
Well, NBA Jam Tournament edition right there.
Shout out Mark Trammell. Yeah.
Calling this the flame game, Dan. These are the things. These are our Saturday flames. The things that we're into from this past Saturday. So
hot and spicy.
Yeah, I've got a bunch. You've got a bunch. Why don't you get started? What gave you the warm fuzzies?
The warm fuzzies?
Yeah, the flames.
Look, it was and continues to be, as we record this episode, a very interesting day out west in the Pac-12. So Oregon starts slow against Washington State. Cam Ward throws for like 430 some odd yards on nearly 50 attempts. So they didn't really have a rushing attack to speak of. And Oregon starts relatively slow. Washington State's competitive. I think it's Lincoln Victor who got off really well, who settled down for Washington State. But it was the rushing attack. The rushing attack for Oregon, the defensive adjustments. They get to Cam Ward 6 times in this game overall, and it was the talent. It was the patience from this Oregon team. Bo Nix didn't make too many mistakes. I'm not still crazy about this offense, but I'm talking to a Penn State fan, and Oregon entered this game as like the number 1 points per drive offense.
Take a knee, boys. Grab a beer. Let's have a chat.
I'm gonna keep this, all relative.
Sure.
But I view this through the lens of what are they going to do against Utah this coming week? What are they going to do against if they play Washington again? What are they going to do against an Oregon State team who's dangerous? So that's where I stand right now with the Oregon offense. So the warm and fuzzies to me within the Pac-12, Oregon's adjustments in the second half, patience on offense, and just swarming on defense, a very talented Cam Ward. UCLA making a quarterback change. and looking more competent and making fewer errors, as they're currently up comfortably against Stanford right now. The last I checked, it was 21-0. So I think there's a little bit more calm and ease right now in Westwood/Pasadena for the Bruins. I don't know what's going to happen with Washington, Arizona State. I'm not currently watching it. I know it's halftime and it's 7-3 Sun Devils. And then we already talked about Utah-USC ad nauseum. And we got a couple teams, obviously. Colorado, the most notable of them, off this week in the Pac-12. So that to me is where I'm starting out with my Flames and
Saturday
hot and
Flames.
spicy.
Yeah. By the way, if you're listening this far in, give us a subscription or a follow on your podcasting app of choice. Leave us a rating or a review. All that stuff helps. Verballers.com is where you can go for our Patreon if you want to get bonus perks, ad-free episodes, all of our episodes ad-free, bonus stuff. We're going to have another Jeff Scheme video coming this week. And of course, you can go hang out on our Verballer Discord, which is undefeated. Just the best place to hang out on Saturdays. Got a long ways to go this season through bowl season and the playoffs. Join up with our community and play in our pick'em game, our weekly pick'em game. You know you'll beat me, so you're not going to be last. All right. What gave me the warm fuzz?
What gave you the warm fuzzes? Give me a conference.
ACC.
All right. ACC had an amazing day.
ACC had an incredible day. Absolutely incredible day. So first and foremost, credit where it is due. Out of nowhere, and I do mean nowhere, the Virginia-North Carolina game was out of control. North Carolina came in number 10. They were a home favorite of about 24 points.
Big comeback win against Miami last week. Yep.
Won 41-31 last week against Miami. It's a big win. Everyone's talking them up. Top 10 team. They lose to 1-5 Virginia.
I saw Tony Elliott smile for the first time in what felt like 18 months.
He has not smiled in forever.
Yeah.
31-27 was your final score. One of those deals, Dan, where the Carolina defense of yesteryear showed back up. Came back for encore here. And look, Virginia played a good game. Virginia got a really big win for Tony Elliott on the back of Tony Muskett, who played quarterback, Malik Washington, who was the receiver, who had like 12 grabs for 115 and a touchdown. Virginia came to play, and North Carolina just could not get the job done. Just not enough big moments. Had big stat lines, of course, for Drake May, 347, 2 touchdowns and a losing effort, but had the game-ending interception after getting hit by a defender. Virginia stepping up in the manner that they did to take North Carolina basically out of this national conversation, this playoff conversation, if you want, I think was probably the headliner in the ACC. Now, of course, the conference is thrown into an absolute blender over the last couple weeks. We don't know who the second best team is in the ACC at this point. We feel like Florida State is the clear number one. It not just because of what we saw this week, but from what they've done so far this season. They've got a bunch of quality wins. But Florida State right now, as it stands, is the only unbeaten team still standing in the ACC. And that's a Florida State Seminoles team that was down against Duke. Duke looked really good in the first half. It was 20-17 at halftime against Duke. The Noles come out. They pour it on in the second half. I was trying to figure out the best way to characterize this, and I kept coming back to professional. This was a professional win from Florida State.
I agree.
It was a professional win because the deeper they got into this game, the more the mismatches became apparent. The more the mismatches out wide became apparent. I don't know who's going to cover these receivers. If Jordan Travis has time to throw, that is a problem for anybody on this schedule. It did help that Riley Leonard got hurt. They still would have won even if he were healthy.
This is probably the last good defense that Florida State's going to face this year.
I mean, they would have beaten Duke no matter what. But Riley Leonard gets hurt again, hurts his ankle. He was out for the game.
Yeah. Backup couldn't do anything. Yeah.
No, Florida State's just an extremely scary team to try and match up with guy to guy. And I'm excited to see what they do. I mean, look, they're definitely not short of a clunker at some point, or not above a clunker at some point, excuse me. But for the time being, this was a professional win is what I settled on.
Yeah, and it's a patient win, and that's the word I used for Oregon too. It was very patient of Florida State, understanding what the Duke defense was doing, not try to bomb it down the field to Keon Coleman and get him 200 yards. It was Johnny Wilson patient. It was Trey Benson patient. It was Jordan Travis seemingly getting lost in the wash and then finding a way out and tossing it for 6 yards on 3rd and 5 or whatever, or scrambling for the yards and sliding. It was sort of to apologize to Sam Hinkie. It was trusting the process, right? It was, we know we're more talented. We know we can take care of business against a tough team, but it's going to take 4 quarters to do so. I don't know. They scored 2 or 3 touchdowns to close it out against Duke, I think, in the 4th quarter. And it showed. It was a really impressive win from Florida State. And you're right that the number 2 in the ACC is still probably North Carolina because of their ceiling. I know Miami pulled it out against Clemson tonight, and it was awfully close against Clemson with Florida State. They, I think, only led when they won the game, but it's not even top heavy. It's Florida State heavy, and even Florida State's not really separating itself, and that's okay because winning is better than losing, Ty, as we all agree.
And then the final, I think, interesting point that gave me the flames, the Saturday flames, if you will, on this year's Saturday, the Miami game. The Miami-Clemson game was really good. That was a good football game. And I think second act Saturday was in full effect here, especially for Miami. Bear in mind, Miami needed it bad. They needed it bad. Bradley wrote about it in our newsletter this week that we sent out. Miami was in need of a win in a big way. They lost to Georgia Tech in that heartbreaker, that inconceivable loss that they had 2 weeks ago. Then they lose to North Carolina last week in the manner that they did. Now they knock off Clemson in double overtime. Naturally, that's the way things work in the ACC, as everybody jumbles about.
Whatever you think of Clemson, yeah.
Whatever you think of Clemson, it's a good win.
Yeah.
It was a good win. These were two teams with 2 losses, and a loss for either of them was going to spell some really bad news. So Miami goes in there with a backup quarterback because TVD was basically a no-go. And the defense steps up, holds Clemson to 4 of 14 on 3rd downs, forces 3 turnovers. Miami finally gets a home conference win and gets the monkey off their back. I believe 28-20 was the final score. I thought this was a really big win for Miami. I don't know what the future holds for this team, but to lose in the manner that they did for 2 consecutive weeks, to come back home against arguably a better team than either of those 2 and win, that is really impressive to me.
Man, and Cade Klubnik took some hits.
He took some shots, yeah.
He had a nice connection with, I think it was Brenning Stool, the tight end. And through, I don't want to call them 50-50 balls, but I'm going to put this ball somewhere in your catch zone, your catch radius, excuse me. Hopefully you can make a play. And he did. He made plays. But it was Miami, even with that freshman quarterback, whether or not he was leaning on Colby Young, whether or not they got a couple, they needed those big plays on the ground, and then to come through an overtime on 4th down. I didn't love that call, but I love any call that works. And it just didn't work with Cade Klubnik trying to keep and run. And it was a great defensive play for Miami. Miami stepped it up in overtime. And, as you mentioned, first conference win at home for Mario Cristobal in Miami had to come at some point.
Yeah.
And I was a little disappointed. And this is not me picking on Miami, but I don't know, man. Clemson's coming to town and you're not filling your stadium. I know this is a thing that people harp on Miami about, but come on, guys.
I know. It's a
Let's
bad
fill
look.
it up.
It's a bad look. All right. Give me some Saturday Flames for a different conference.
Okay, so obviously LSU took care of business. Loved the end zone, by the way. There was the camo.
That was awesome.
LSU taking on Army. They beat them 62-0. There's not a lot to take away from this game other than the fact that, once again, sets up a huge Alabama matchup in a couple of weeks. How about Mizzou? Yeah, South Carolina lost in the way that if you had told me this was going to be the final score, I don't know if you have the score in front of you. It was 45-30 or something. Alabama. Mizzou taking down South Carolina. It's late, Ty. It's quite late. So this is me.
Your final score was 34-12.
Was that? Okay. Yeah, it was 34-12. I knew around what the difference was going to be. Okay. South Carolina couldn't protect Spencer Rattler. He was on the run. He was shelled by what hasn't been a super consistent Mizzou defense, but it was really the Mizzou rushing attack that got me going, that got my heart all hot and flaming. Is that what we're talking about, Ty?
Sure. Saturday Flames.
Saturday Flames. Brady Cook was quite good. The passing game was in a nice place, but to me, it was hounding Spencer Rattler. It was overwhelming the South Carolina offensive line once again. And there was just something about watching Cody Schrader. The lanes were wide open.
Yeah.
They were like suburban freeway lanes at 4 a.m. Just huge and luxurious lanes to
Let's
run
just
through the
swerve
South
over
Carolina.
into the carpool lane, shall we?
It was look, and it again, this is not something to take for granted, obviously, if you're a Missouri fan, with where the offense has been these past couple of years. But taking care of business in the same way that I said it's going to be fun and weird, and I'm looking forward to Alabama LSU. Mizzou Georgia is going to be fun. It should be fun. I hope it's fun. It has all the makings of fun, and that's what filled my heart. On the flip side, Mikey Wright and Mississippi State 7, KJ Jefferson and Arkansas 3.
Was this not sort of like the budget Iowa, Minnesota of the day?
I don't know who has it worse right now. I mean, look, I know who has it worse because Iowa's been winning games in the manner in which they lost that game, which I'm sure we're going to get to shortly. To be an Arkansas fan and to be immediately teased with promising results, with strong receivers developing, with playmakers on defense, maybe a little bit less so, but Barry Odom was creative with this defense. And then where this Arkansas team is now, with a defense that actually still plays pretty hard and has playmakers, and an offense that can't protect KJ Jefferson at all. I mean, he's short-arming dudes by like 7 yards.
So you're telling me this gives you the warm fuzzies?
I'm not saying it gives me the warm fuzzies. The fact that it's over and we can move past this game gives me the warm fuzzies.
Because I had this in my scary stories segment, which is coming up in a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the offense was not good.
No, this was a light day in the SEC.
This was Arkansas losing 6 in a row now, and Arkansas being pretty much on the verge of bowl ineligibility unless they go 4-0.
How about a little bit of fight from Auburn gave me the warm fuzzies. You can't throw the ball, and you're still giving Ole Miss a game. It was 14-all deeper into this one. So the fight from Auburn in losing efforts, I suppose, is something that I'm into because I like competitive games. I have no idea what I feel about Ole Miss, who seems to play exactly to the level. They're like a rich man's Boston College, the way we've talked about them. Like, they play exactly to the level of everybody that they play. So good for Auburn for showing that fight. That's the warm fuzzies.
The two warm fuzzies for me in the Big 12. My Oklahoma State Cowboys, baby.
Yeah, the team that you were positive was going to have a terrific bounce back here.
I wasn't.
But
I was dunking on Oklahoma State pretty much all year.
Yeah.
To my credit, I did recognize. I recognize.
If I may pat myself on the back.
If I may pat hey, you do it all the time. Don't start.
I do.
If I can pat myself in the back here for a second, I did recognize the error of my ways.
Okay.
And I said after that bye week, I felt like something clicked because remember they beat K-State.
Yeah.
Now,
offensive line looks a lot more together. Yeah.
A lot more together. Oklahoma State may be the only team I can accurately predict right now. I'm serious. They're the only team I understand. And it's weird, and it probably shouldn't be that way. But 48-34 on the road
in Morgantown
over West Virginia. Another absolute monster game from Ollie Gordon, who had 284 and 4 touchdowns in this game.
Dude.
Yeah.
That's all. Just a dude. Yeah.
The Pokes now, get this. I almost can't believe I'm saying it. The Pokes are a whisper quiet.
Yeah.
5-2.
Yeah.
They host Cincinnati next week. Then they have Bedlam at home in week 10. The Bedlam game is really the last big one left in the schedule. They've got, I think, a schedule that's very manageable the rest of the way.
Oh, yeah.
I could totally see 9-3. I
don't know how it exists in the Big 12 that every Big 12 team has an amazing back half of their schedule.
We're wild.
Like, oh, let's take a look at this team's. Okay, so they've got Baylor, they've got Cincinnati, they've got Kansas, and Kansas is good, obviously, but they don't have much of a defense. Like, every team in the Big 12 seems to have it very easy the back half, and it's incredible.
The other team in the Big 12 that I want to call out is K-State. K-State kicked the absolute tar out of TCU.
Yes, they did.
They absolutely kicked the crap out of TCU. And, we were Hoover approvers and we were into the quarterback change at TCU. Nah.
Yeah.
K-State was like, nah,
took a
we are not having it.
Monty Bailey's still good, but
yeah. They outgained TCU 587 to 300 and rushed for 343 on the ground.
I saw my guy, Avery Johnson, doing work once again.
There you go. And let me close out the Big Ten here. Just some of the warm fuzzies there. We do have scary stories. We have other stuff here to get to. Michigan is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
They're ridiculous. They absolutely annihilated Michigan State 49-0. And that's not unexpected, because I think we expected this would be a bit of a runaway game, even if it were within the point spread, which was 24.5. But I think especially after the last 72 hours of distractions with all the sign sealing stuff and probably a lot of questioning as to whether or not Michigan is as good as everyone thinks, or if it's because of something else, i.e. cheating. I think they use that. I think they use that to focus this team. And it says a lot about them that they did not start this game slowly. That has been a Michigan thing this season, starting a little bit slowly. And they went out there on the road against their in-state rival, and they went up 14-0 without blinking. And then they poured it on. They did not let up the entire way through. They scored, I want to say, within the last couple minutes when the game was well in hand already. So this was, speaking of professional wins, this was a very professional win for Michigan, taking care of business. As you like to say, taking care of business, often underrated,
yeah.
And speaking of taking care of business, how about the Rutgers Scarlet Knights?
Tried to tell you.
Getting bowl eligible, Dan.
Yeah.
Getting bowl eligible. They needed to do it this week. They have other opportunities, but to do it this week would have definitely taken a lot of pressure off that roster. They win by 17 on the road over Indiana. They did it despite Gavin Wimsatt going 5 of 12 passing for 39 yards. The way that they did it was because Gavin Wimsatt also ran for 143 and 3 touchdowns alongside Kyle Monangai, who I believe is still the Big Ten's leading rusher, who added about 109 more yards. 276 on the ground for the Scarlet Knights, playing the style of football that we know Greg Schiano wants to play. So good on them. Full eligibility is pretty exciting.
I think you just don't understand Rutgers offensive football. You just don't appreciate it, Ty. They're like the jam band of college football, right? You don't know how to listen. You don't know how to take it in. By the way, Ty and I are going to be circling the country following Monangai and Wimsatt on tour. Don't they sound like jam bands?
A little bit. Yeah.
Dude, I loved Monangai when they were playing clubs, Ty. You can't tell me otherwise. You have to really know how to listen to Monangai and Wimsatt. That's all I'm saying. You don't appreciate 4 of whatever. Who cares, Ty? This is winning football happening in Piscataway, New Jersey.
Hey, good for him, man. Good for him. You got any other flames before we get to our scary stories?
Well, so that was it for the Big Ten flames of yours?
Yeah. I got some scary stories from the Big Ten. We'll get to talk about Iowa, Minnesota.
It was a very fun, active group of 5 weekend. If I may say so myself. First of all, Biff Poggi with his cutoff shirt. They beat Charlotte. Charlotte beat ECU. Obviously, Biff Poggi, the head coach of Charlotte, showing off the guns. He looked like he was riding a Peloton the entire game and just showed up for the interview afterwards wearing whatever he wore on the bike. He looked like he came in 5th place in the Philly Wing Bowl. Look, I gave him my all. What are you gonna do? She's tiny but super effective. North Texas kind of stormed back against Tulane, but the Mean Green held on. Are we still talking about Biff?
No, keep going. That's good.
JT Daniels to Luke McCaffrey. It's big, Ty. It keeps happening. Rice keeps winning. They beat Tulsa. Kevin Wilson in Tulsa. Jamie Chadwell's Liberty 7-0. They won somewhat late over Middle Tennessee, but they win. Toledo held on, Ty. They jumped out to a comfortable lead against Miami of Ohio. This was a game that everybody that watches MAC football had circled, and Toledo on the road, I think as 1-point favorites, managed to hold on. The more complete team. So that's what I took away from looking around the country at the group of 5 conferences, but a fun one nevertheless. James Madison keeps on winning. Jordan McLeod still very much a dude for the Duke. So
all right,
fun times.
Do we have any dudes that we wanted to call out here?
You want dudes or you want scary stories?
No, let's do dude alerts real quick. These are Saturday Flames.
So I mentioned Ollie Gordon. Sione Vaki for
your
Utah. I'm
boy.
just going to shout him out once again.
Yeah.
Bucky Irving, both through the air and on the ground for Oregon. Naquan Wright for South Florida, 186 yards on the ground and a win over UConn. Nothing to turn your nose at. Marvin Harrison Jr., kind of a retired dude, but like was kind of the only dude on the field for an offense. What else do I hear? Lincoln Victor for Wazoo in that game goes for 160 against a good Oregon defense. Caden Salter for Liberty, all over the place for them. Haynes King, Georgia Tech. You didn't mention that. Maybe it's in your Georgia Tech BC scary story segment, but he was quite effective, especially on the ground. And I think that's all I sort of have right now. How about?
I mean, you got to give a shout out to Thomas Castellanos.
Yeah. Oh, he was
for
all over
Boston
the place.
College in a big win over Georgia Tech. Haynes King was sort of the offense for Georgia Tech, but Thomas Castellanos remains one of the underrated stories in the ACC this season. When he's out there, he's been pretty effective. Not much around him, but BC with a nice win.
And also Donovan Smith in a losing effort, which I'm sure you're going to get to for Houston against Texas.
Dan, give me that scary story.
I think this is it.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Bill, on your bamboo flute. Sounds marvelous.
Scary stories. We call this the Rocky Lombardi Picture Show.
Yeah.
We'll get to your reverbs here
Rocky
momentarily.
Long Picture Show. Rocky Seto Picture Show. Yeah.
So a couple things for me. The first, if we're talking about weird things and bad performances and injuries of note and whatnot, UCF's 2-point conversion attempt on the road in Norman. So UCF plays an extremely solid football game against the 6th ranked Sooners, again, in Norman.
Yeah.
The Sooners won 31-29 after UCF called a double pass on their attempt to tie it. It was
everybody was kind of calling this weekend.
Everybody, it was like double pass week. Everybody was calling the double pass. This one was so bad, and Oklahoma did not bite at all that the guy didn't even have a chance to throw the second pass. It was a backwards pass, a lateral, out to the left-hand side. Nothing was open. Guy gets knocked down. Oklahoma survives. That would have been UCF's chance to tie it. I come back to this time and again. Never underestimate the play caller's ability to overthink the biggest call of the game.
Yeah.
Never underestimate it. These guys need a first-class pass on your Underthink Express. They just always overthink it in the big spots. And this was an opportunity for UCF on the road. Again, big spot against Oklahoma. I thought they played really well against Oklahoma. Obviously,
I loved watching.
Would indicate that.
Was it RJ Harvey, the running back for UCF, with some big plays? Here's the only thing pushback I'm gonna.
A lot of big plays in this game. A lot of big plays.
A lot of big plays. I thought Dylan Gabriel played admirably. The only rule with 4th and short, 3rd and short, 2-point conversions, overtime big moments, the only rule is has to work. So you can say hated that call. They needed to just underthink it and go. If it always works in practice, if it's worked before in games, the only rule, and this is a book too, so I'm just copying it. The only rule is it has to work, because if it works, you're going to come on this show and say, what the stones on Gus Malzahn to call that and for his team to execute it. But you're not wrong.
You run a play like that. It's hard enough in tight windows.
You cut off half the field.
It's hard enough in tight windows to complete any pass.
Yeah.
Now you're asking them to complete 2. And one may be uncontested, but there's a lot that needs to go right. Yeah. I admire the gumption to go for a play like that. And you're right. If it works, he's a genius. But it didn't. 31-29. By the way, we were scoreboard watching the whole time, doing our live stream when we did a live stream during the Penn State Ohio State game. So I went back, I watched the Express version of this, and I'm going to dive into it more this week. But as you said, a lot of big plays. Oklahoma shuffling their line right now because of injury, and UCF really took advantage of that. But Oklahoma with a late push on the ground in the 4th quarter, rushed for nearly 100 yards in the 4th quarter to get to 7-0. So bit of a scare for Oklahoma, definitely a bit of a scare for UCF with the way they called that final 2-point conversion. But that's scary story number one. For me, the other one is, and you mentioned the Texas game, Quinn Ewers went down again.
Yes, he did.
So Quinn Ewers goes down late third quarter with what Sark referred to as a shoulder injury. He said we should know more tomorrow. It's concerning to me.
Yeah.
I saw some people on Twitter talking about potentially a collarbone. That would
Which
not
is what
be
I think
good.
he had last year, right?
That would not be good.
Right.
That would not be good. So he had the injury issue a year ago. This is something to watch on the Texas side. Texas also went up 21-0 and then gave it all back. Needed to refocus in the final 18 minutes to get the job done. And Houston had a shot, but also could not get the job done. If there is any silver lining whatsoever, and I do not mean to imply that Quinn Ewers getting hurt is at all good.
Yeah.
If there is any silver lining to having to sub out Quinn Ewers, it is having to sub in Malik Murphy, who is a man. He is a monster of a man. And I have been dying to see more of Malik Murphy. I always expected that it would be somewhere else after a transfer. And it probably still will be, but depending on what happens here with Quinn Ewers, Texas almost gave this one away. They didn't, and we're going to have to wait and see what happens with Quinn.
Didn't do much other than hand the ball off. And by the way, and hope Quinn Ewers is all right, these two running backs for Texas kind of stop on the dime and explode. Like the best of them, CJ Baxter and who's the guy, the Jonathan Brooks.
Yep.
They're really fun. And they're not Bijan Robinson, but they can take this team pretty far if they can at least cause concern of, or at least open up play action for whoever's playing quarterback, be it Quinn Ewers or a backup, moving forward. Thought the spot was terrible at the end of the game. I thought Houston converted the short yardage play, and I think it was a third down. It looked like they pushed him forward.
I mean, it looked like his
pretty clearly to me.
It looked like his body and the ball were over the line to gain. So I don't.
Yeah, and Dana Holgerson,
know what that was.
He's pissed after the game. They come up short on 4th and 2 or whatever. Wasn't a terrible call, but I didn't think they should have had to do it in the first place. So good fight from Houston. Good for Texas for holding on.
Final scary story for me. Like Iowa, Minnesota. Minnesota. It was it in one sense, it was exactly what we thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
It was exactly what we thought it was going to be. To quote Dennis Green, they are who we thought they were completely. 12-10 Minnesota wins. It was so ugly. It was beautiful. This
coming
game.
Nowhere near the total, right?
Nowhere near the total. The total opened, I think, when we talked about it at 32.5. At kickoff, I think it came down to 30 or 30.5. It was extremely low and still nowhere close.
Right. Nowhere
close to it. Iowa has been playing this brand of football every week, so it was not unexpected. They kind of had it coming in the manner that they lost this game.
Yeah.
And I feel bad saying about that. I'm legitimately not trying to dunk on Iowa for the manner that they lost, because I know this is a rivalry and the Floyd game is fun and all that. But you play this brand of football, you leave yourself such a thin margin for error. You kind of have something like this coming. So what basically goes down at the end of this game, and I'm sure you can read about this online, there is a crazy sequence in the last 4 minutes where Iowa gets the ball, of course, with their backup quarterback who really doesn't do anything, gives them nothing at quarterback.
Right.
They've got the ball late in the game. Kirk Ferentz has a decision to make. It's 4th and 1. They decide they're going to punt with 2 minutes left. 2.5 minutes left, something like that. They have all their timeouts.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes sense to give the ball back to Minnesota. Minnesota hadn't done anything on offense all day. Give the ball back to Minnesota. Minnesota goes 3 and out. On the ensuing punt, it is one of those deals where it lands off to the left and well short of the punt returner, Cooper DeJean.
All-American DeJean, All-American corner. Yeah.
All-American corner. Lands short of him, bounces into his hands. And as he is running to get the ball, he is pointing with his right hand, and with his left hand, sort of a combination of making a gesture along with, I think, just swinging his arm as he's running, like you would normally do if you run.
Like you would indicate to somebody that you're on the phone. Like, shh, hold on, right? He's waving his arm behind him.
It wasn't even that obvious.
He was clearly waving his hand behind him.
I don't know. It looked to me like he was just running. and he was moving his arm a little bit. I don't see how they could interpret that as a signal, but okay, whatever. So he gets the ball, he picks it up, he puts some moves on guys, like crazy moves, runs for a touchdown. Everybody's going crazy.
Yeah.
Refs throw a flag. They go to review it. Actually, I don't even know if there was a flag. They just go to review it.
Right.
I didn't think this was a reviewable scenario, but whatever. They take it into review. They come out of review. They decide, oh, by the way, that was an invalid fair catch signal. Therefore, it's a dead ball at that point.
Which is the rule.
Now, there is a rule. It's very vaguely worded.
Yeah.
It's open to interpretation. What's considered a valid fair catch signal is when you put your hand above your head and wave. That's what everybody does. You are allowed to point, as he did with his right hand, but if that also includes some sort of waving motion with the other hand, then they rule it an invalid signal, because obviously it if you're on the punt coverage team, you see a hand gesture, that is your cue to lay off.
Right.
That presents an unfair advantage. So it is genuinely a good rule.
Which I don't know if I saw Minnesota players lay off completely. Like,
no, there were like
tell.
6 guys. I saw Minnesota fans online were like, "Wow, our punt coverage team let off." No, they didn't. There were like 6 guys there. They couldn't tackle him. I don't know why the refs didn't blow it dead in the moment. That would have been the easiest way to play it if they thought he signaled. But nonetheless, whether it was reviewable or not, they took it into review. They decided after the review it was an invalid fair catch signal. And after that, Minnesota gets the job done. Minnesota gets the stop, and Iowa ends up losing 12-10. Another lost bet for me. I was very close on the punt bowl parlay, Dan.
Right.
Very close to the punt bowl parlay.
Sorry.
So look, this is a really bad offensive game. We knew that going in. The over-under knew it, and they couldn't set that over-under low enough. So, Iowa having 2 yards in the second half, though every bit appalling, is not at all unexpected. And in a way, it's sort of beautiful the way they play football. Like, I'm so beyond Iowa not having an offense.
Post-offense football.
It's just they're playing on a different frequency altogether. You just got to embrace it and not think twice about it. But again, I circle back to what I said here at the start of this. Like, you play that brand of football, it's fine, but you leave yourself almost no wiggle room. And
correct.
Whether or not that's a reviewable call, I don't know. But you leave yourself susceptible to moments like that can shift the balance of the game in the other team's direction. And
there's no margin for error playing like this.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
it's not different than what USC does. It's just looks different. But thematically, it's pretty similar, that if you are going to choose to do this, if you're going to form a team like this, if you're going to hire the coaches to do this, you are going to get this. And for me, I saw our friend Spencer Hall said something like, I didn't think that was the right way to end that game or something like that. But he gave the refs a reason to do something, right? That you can leave no doubt. And the movements and the pointing, and I know, players point at bouncing punts all the time. That there's nothing unclear about that. But the waving thing as a punt is in the air, or even if it's subtle waving, even if it's arm motions, if it's any arm motion short of setting up to catch a punt, it's going to lead to ambiguity. And I think your broader point is the right one. If your win comes down to a single play in which a cornerback, a transcendent quarterback, is returning a punt for a touchdown, and that is everything essentially you need to win a college football game, then the other team deserves that giant metallic pig. That's just how it works.
We play football for the metallic pig. Yeah.
And so Floyd goes to Minnesota. That's how it works.
I mean, it's just the sequence of events is really a raw deal, I thought, for Iowa in the manner it went down. Whether or not it was the right call, I should mention they went to the review to check for something else. They thought maybe he stepped out of bounds, and then while they were in review, they saw this instead, and then so somebody's going to have to write the article as to whether or not it's even a reviewable circumstance, and if that's something that's allowed. I don't know, but regardless, that's the way it went down. Those are my scary stories. You got anything to add here?
Well, I mentioned Arkansas and Mississippi State. I mentioned Washington, I believe, is still losing. I don't know if you have a scoreboard in front of you. Washington is still losing with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, 7-3. So that's an ongoing. They're losing to a quarterback who has thrown for 3.3 yards per attempt. Michael Penix has 2 interceptions. I think one was off of a tipped ball that I saw right before we started recording. They have 4 total turnovers in this game as we speak. Seems pretty scary a week after everybody is giving the Heisman to Michael Penix. They beat a rival in Oregon. Game day's there, and they have a letdown of letdowns against a team. And I did not fully realize this. And I hope Washington represents the Pac-12 very well throughout the rest of the season. My preference would be for Oregon to win the conference, but they've lost to Arizona State 13 of 15 times.
It's amazing.
I did not realize that kind of ownership happening between Tempe and Seattle. So that's I think my final scariest story. It was a fun weekend, man. Unless you're a Penn State fan.
Unless you're a Penn State fan. Let's get to our roasts.
Please.
We used to roast Stay Puft marshmallows by the fire at Camp Wakanda.
And let's start with our reverbs, Dan. We told people to give us a call at 855-VERBAL-3. Gather around the campfire, one and all. Let's play some cheesy acoustic guitar music, as one does when we're gathered around for this sort of emotional experience. Let's hear what the fine people have to get off their chest. Here are your reverbs.
All right, I brought some food for us to roast at our campfire tonight, guys. I got some buffalo burgers for the Dukes, some Bearcat kebabs here for the Bears, and for you, Penn State, 21.6 slices of bacon.
Hi, this is Brian, a depressed Penn State fan in Madison, Wisconsin, and I've got some emotion I need to get out around this campfire. Penn State is a blocked field goal return away from having lost 12 in a row against Ohio State, and it's hard to see how you can believe anything except this is their ceiling. This is as good as it gets.
The turning point in this Penn State-Ohio State game happened in 2014 with Penn State's coaching hire.
In my search for somebody to blame, I have decided that, Ty, this is all your fault. Knowing the full power of your reverse jinx, you still picked Penn State this week. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
It's okay.
That game was ugly as sin. But Ohio State has a championship-level defense, and they're ready for Michigan this year. Oh, we coming, boys. We coming.
A, Eller doesn't have the arm. B, you're such a saving plays, which doesn't really happen. C, Eller has nobody to throw to. D, we don't remember, but, vibes. Turns out it was E, all of the above.
Dan Enos has taken the Arkansas offense from rushing for 200 yards a game to now maybe not even getting 200 yards a game. Time to move on.
2, 3, 4.
Are you ready to talk to your kids about a bowl-eligible Rutgers?
If you ever wondered what it was like to watch a raccoon fight a possum at the bottom of a trash can for a rotting donut, turn on any Big Ten West football game.
TJ Fleck is going to ride a sinking mast into the harbor like Jack Sparrow because he's PJ Fleck.
Ty, the thing you should know is that a reverse jinx must be intended. You have to mean it. The dead walk tonight. Roll Tide.
No surprise Tennessee made so many boneheaded calls in the second half because zombie Alabama ate your brains. Roll Tide, baby.
Your Bama pick was as bad as a jinx, but sweet as soda pop. I still dream about that. Hildenbrand, your reverse jinx didn't work on me. Thank you, Hildenbrand. Bama beat Tennessee.
And Ty, this is Michael. After watching the worst loss in Carolina history as 23.5-point favorites against Virginia, surrounded by friends and family on my birthday.
This is Andrew in Atlanta. And come on down to The Price is Right, where Penn State is playing the Bob Barker offense because it is both spayed and neutered.
Andrew going out with a fantastic roast, Dan. 855-Rebel-3. Great calls there. Thank you to Shay for cutting those up as he does so skillfully. every Saturday throughout the course of the day for us, Dan. What do you got for me this week?
In terms of what?
In terms of roasts.
Like my feelings?
What is your strong opinion?
Oh, my strong opinion of the week?
Yeah. I mean, last week you told us not to take Michigan seriously.
Oh, right.
And this week they won by nearly 50 against one of their bigger rivals. So what say you now?
I don't have anything more to say about Michigan. They threw to an Indiana tight end, the tight end transfer.
Yeah.
They threw to Roman Wilson. JJ McCarthy did. My big roast tonight is I don't trust the SEC at all. I have no trust in the SEC, and I love it, but between Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, Florida, Texas A&M, Mizzou, I have zero trust. I think I love it, but I don't think anybody should be confident in any team. Like, if you talk to Georgia fans tonight, they're still a little bit worried about Georgia. I don't think any team in the SEC is worth trusting at this point.
Okay. I think Caleb Williams should fake a leg injury.
Oh, that's okay. So this is just a take. Yeah. I like this.
I think he should fake a leg injury. He is, I think, a lock for the overall number 1 draft pick. I think it's going to be.
You think so?
I think so. Absolutely. I think it's a frustrating year ahead as they get more into the teeth of this schedule.
Mm-hmm.
It will not hurt his draft stock one iota if he doesn't play. I'm not usually that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see opt-outs. I think it makes college football a watered-down product. But I don't know. That was a look of a defeated guy there on the sidelines after the game, just sort of lounging on the bench, looking up into the sky, head in hands. Like that is a frustrating way to lose. And, despite the fact that the last 2 weeks, maybe he wasn't as flawless as he's been otherwise this season, this is not a loss on Caleb Williams. It's not on Caleb Williams. It is a loss, I think, on coaching. It is a loss on not being able to develop some of the guys around him that can help support him and can help take USC to the next level. So, though he's got some responsibility in it, sure, it is more other people's fault than his. And I could just see if you're in a guy his position, just decide, let's develop a limp. I don't know.
I saw 3 different Caleb Williams commercials today.
Yeah.
During games.
Wendy's, there's
Nissan is the Heisman House, Nissan, and I think he's doing Dr. Pepper ones as well.
Yeah.
He's doing Fansville.
Yep.
So, I don't know. I don't know if he has to play every game, but I don't hate that.
No. And I'm not an opt-out guy, but I'm telling you, I think
still only lost 1 Pac-12 game.
Lost only 1 Pac-12 game, 2 overall, but the writing is on the wall for more, and you know it.
I know, of course.
You know it. Thank you to one and all for calling our Reverb line at 855-VERBAL-3, Dan. One other point of note here.
Yes.
I didn't really know where to put this. Did you mention UNLV?
6-1 UNLV.
6-1 UNLV.
Jaden Maeva
kicked 6 field goals, Dan. Bowl eligible for the 5th time in school history. So good on them.
Incredible.
Close out on a
Barry
high note.
Odom, first year.
Good for the running Rebs. Okay. So look, thank you to one and all for joining us on this campfire episode. If you want to throw dirt or something on the fire, I guess we're not supposed to leave this thing burning, smoldering deep into the night. Please do throw us a subscribe or follow on your podcasting app of choice. We would very much appreciate it. If you've already done that, rate, review. That, of course, lets other people know, that this is a good podcast that maybe you should listen to as well. We are growing the Solid Verbal family each and every week. We'd love to have you alongside us here. Verballers.com is where you can go for the Patreon exclusive stuff like the ad-free episodes, the bonus content that we drop on Thursdays, of course, Verballer Discord, and the weekly game for fabulous prizes. That and much, much more. Verballers.com, VERBALLERS.com, Dan. Good week.
That's all I have.
Good week of games.
Incredible week.
Can't wait for week 9. It is going to be a banger of, I don't know, final 4 or 5 weeks of this.
Agree.
For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand. Thanks for supporting the Solid Verbal. We'll talk to you all soon. Stay solid.
Peace.